Oh, Robert, you're on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
Hello, good evening. Yeah, I saw the title of the YouTube stream, and I thought I'd make a comment on it. I've watched both your work before. I used to be more kind of atheist and agnostic, and I appreciated what you did back then. Um, but on the specific topic of souls, like
Okay.
so souls, that was one of the things that kind of I had strong feelings about because I had an experience with my dad where certain sort of neurological things happened, which kind of shook my belief in souls. Um, so I understand the kind of material arguments against souls and that kind of thing. But
Okay.
I know since then, though, um, like there've been other sort of things um, about sort of theism versus atheism more broadly that have, nudged me in the other direction. And the other thing is that, since you're saying that kind of souls are dead, that's the title of the YouTube stream. I'm not sure if you're
They would
aware.
have to have
But
existed and been alive to be died to die, but I mean, I think that's hyperbole.
Yeah, I'm not saying that souls are
well,
dead. I'm saying that they don't exist.
Yeah.
The notion of a soul is that we have this magical, which means supernatural. We have this supernatural, magical, miraculous, alternative self that's somehow living inside of ourselves, and that when we die, then this inner magic self, the spirit, whatever, comes out and wanders around. Um, that we know came from the idea that people didn't understand that air was particulate matter, but they knew that you would die if you can't breathe. And they also knew that if somebody sneezed or coughed in your face, and they're sick, you would get the same sickness that they did. So they correlated that it was a supernatural thing. That when you have tornadoes and when you make a really big fire, it also makes a tornado. And so they're having this notion of a spiritual universe in addition to the physical one. And then they developed so much mythology based on that when they started figuring out what clouds really are, what storms really are, what volcanoes really are, and they had material explanations that no longer exactly fit what the mythology that they had built up for the supernatural. There remains no evidence of a supernatural. Not only is there not evidence of it exactly where it would be if souls were real, there is specific evidence against it.
hmm, yeah,
It's a lot of evidence
yeah,
against it. I don't think that it's a viable concept at all. If you know anything about neuroscience, I don't think that it's even a conceivably viable concept.
And then while she has a degree in psychology, I've talked to a couple of famous neuroscientists, Patricia Churchland and Daniel Dennett, both of whom told me that there's no established possibility, there's no support for mind-body dualism, for the notion of a soul. Beyond that, I talked to a half a dozen. I did private interviews with a half a dozen over email with a half a dozen neuroscientists, and then I got one to get on camera with me, and they all had the same opinion. There is no soul. We are our bodies. When we die, our consciousness dies with us. Our consciousness is generated by the physical brain, by electrical synapses. And when that stops, when you discharge the capacitors in the brain, that's it. That's all. Good night, Irene. Ain't no coming back. Or you can't exist outside of the body either.
well, yeah, definitely the sort of old-fashioned conceptions of souls have taken a battering, and if you want to reconcile,
What's your conception of it? Like, let's hear the one that works. I want to hear the one that works. I'm always interested in that. Which one's the one that works?
Yeah, I think the one with the least problems would be kind of thinking of sort of the body as a kind of antenna, and your soul being somewhere else, and so in that case you can say like, oh, all these problems with, like, I don't know, people having totally different personalities after they have a brain injury, that's a big problem for the old-fashioned conception of a soul, but it's not such a problem because then you say, oh well, that's just a problem with the antenna or receiver, and so it's not a problem with the soul itself. So you can think
I
up
think
some
sodium
pretty
and
flexible
potassium
models for
ions,
it, I think.
and I think like sodium and potassium ions are are the biggest problem for the soul. So even if it's an antenna, you have an interaction problem, right? There's no mechanism of interaction between the brain, which you demonstratively need to have thoughts and to even have this conversation, to think about it, to like even have the conception of the soul exist in your mind. You need to be able to have those thoughts. In order to have those thoughts, we can like trace that those neurons are firing, and we know what causes those neurons to fire, right? Like that's just demonstratively the case. And we know what causes neurons to fire, and we know what causes those electrical signals to go down the dendrites through the like myelinated dendrites all to the other neurons, so that we can continue to have thoughts and then have more complex thoughts and move our bodies and everything. And we know what causes that neuron to fire is an action potential. That action potential happens when there's a certain concentration of sodium and potassium ions on either side of that neuronal cell membrane. And then a chemical called ATP is released by the mitochondria within that cell membrane to open up the threshold gate so that those sodium and potassium ions can go to rush to either side of the ion to generate the electrical impulse to cause that neuron to fire. So those are all physical things that we can measure. We can look at their material. They're material things. So those sodium and potassium ions need to be in a certain constitution on either side of the cell membrane, like a certain configuration, a certain threshold, in order for that neuron to fire. So if they're not there in that configuration, that neuron doesn't fire for you to have that thought. Demonstratably the case, absolute fucking fact. There's no arguing that. That's true. Where does the soul insert itself into that process? Is the soul using little tweezers to move sodium and potassium ions to either side of the cell membrane? Is the soul generating the ATP that like shoots out of the mitochondria? Is the soul manifesting sodium and potassium ions into existence? Is it somehow replacing them with just its own form of electrical impulse, which begs the question, how does it produce electricity? How does it know which neurons to fire? How does it select them? Does it have its own consciousness so that it knows which ones to interact with? Why don't we see any of that happening? Why, when we look at an MRI, do we not see sodium and potassium ions just manifesting themselves in like great scale all over our brain? Why do we instead see that it's happening in like predictable sequences? And like there's a million questions. So explain which part of that process is the antenna to me, and I might get it.
Sure. Yeah. So it's just there's a lot of questions, and so I need to try and sort of compose myself a little. So yeah, but basically,
Sure.
like we don't know for sure, right, whether all the kind of electrical processes are deterministic or non-deterministic, because chemical reactions, they're subject to the exact positions of electrons within the sort of wave function or whatever you want to call it, and we don't know whether that's deterministic or not. And so, if it's not deterministic, then, or at least not deterministic to anything kind of physical, then I can say that there's room for the soul to interact there.
So
I have to wonder
what
what meaning are you using for deterministic?
Yeah, that's my question. These are physical processes, right? Like I just explained.
I mean that outcomes are fully determined by like prior conditions.
They are. Like, so
well,
can you have a thought without a neuron firing? Like, can you have a thought without neuronal activity, without cellular activity? And you can't have a thought without neuronal activity. Do we know what makes neurons fire?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we know the physical properties, like the physical environmental like context that need, like the preconditions, the required preconditions for a neuron to fire? Are there required preconditions for a neuron to fire?
there are, but some of those
Nope.
preconditions
that's
are
it.
subject to
That's
quantum effects.
just it.
No,
What quantum
because
effect?
you didn't listen to what I said earlier. Like, yeah, are there? Does the working of neurons rely on chemical reactions? Yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a
do
certain
chemical
constitution of
reactions rely on the
task of ionic activity.
electrons? Yes or no?
I didn't hear
Sorry, I
that
didn't hear
question
what you
because I
were
was just
saying.
saying it's not just chemical activity, it also requires electrical impulse and a certain constitution of ionic activity. But yes, okay. So what was the next question?
Even better. Even better, because those also are subject to quantum effects, which we don't know whether they're deterministic or not.
So what does that mean? So that means that we know.
You're obviously not using the
We know
philosophical concept of deterministic. You mean something else. What do you mean by deterministic?
Okay. So, yeah, so like, as far as I understand it, the question about whether sort of quantum mechanics is deterministic comes down to whether or not there are any hidden variables which would account for whether things like electrons do one thing versus another thing, whether they would, I know, go through a sort of grating that's been polarized in a particular way, whether they wouldn't. And so, if there,
what does that have to do with
there
neuronal
are
firing?
kind of,
Can you like build a bridge between quantum mechanics and neuronal firing for me?
Thank you. That's a great question to ask. Yeah, that's what I should do.
Yeah.
So here's an example. So the functioning of a neuron is affected by the level of hormones in that neuron in some circumstances, right?
Wait, hormones in a neuron?
Hormones?
In a neuron.
Well,
Hormones are physiological.
neurotransmitters.
Well, different types of neurons like transmit different types of neurotransmitters, right? So, and then different receptors are capable of receiving those neurotransmitters, but neurons don't fire because of neurotransmitters, right?
Somebody's trying to put in some clarification. Let me put this
another way. Another way. I can.
One second.
Let
me read this, and then you can clarify or correct. Somebody in the chat says he is saying quantum states having to collapse upon observation is a sign of indeterminism due to them seemingly having to change states in the past. I don't see where that's related to what you're saying, but so please clarify.
I'm not sure if I agree with that. Yeah, I'm not sure if that comment, if I agree with that comment or not. Listen,
well, I can't be sure either. I don't know what you mean.
Well,
yeah,
can I
so
answer
you're saying
Shannon's
that
question?
something about neurotransmitters, and them being required.
Yeah, and so, like, for example, kind of the amount of the background level of acetylcholine, that would make a difference about whether whether one neuron manages to sort of pass on the message to another neuron, right?
If you're talking about if you're talking about like receptors, right? Like, so like if you look like at the connection between neurons, like when they're communicating with each other, there's like a cleft, like a gap between them, and they essentially kind of like secrete that neuron into that gap, and then there's uptake on the other side for that neuron to receive it. So if you're saying that in order to transmit that, like in order to transmit acetylcholine, there needs to be there needs to be at least some level of endogenous acetylcholine in the brain to be transmitted, then sure, yeah.
Okay.
Or if you don't have enough of it, like if you have lower dopamine, for example, then like just endogenously, then then there's physiological and cognitive effects. Okay, I agree with that, but I'm not sure where you're angling at.
When we see, there's there's a video that I love that I show a lot that is a paramecium, a pair of paramecium who don't realize at first that they are being engulfed by an amoeba, and then too late they both realize what's up. They get the chemical signature. They're now surrounded by this amoebic structure, and there's some kind of chemical cue that they realize they're in trouble. They can't see, they can't hear, they can't do anything else, but they can detect the chemicals to realize they're now being ingested. And so they go into a fight or flight mode, and they both panic, and they're flying around in this little enclosure that they're now trapped in, and they're running around in desperate panic before they are eventually killed by the amoeba. These organisms are unicellular. They don't have any neurons, yet they have an awareness of their surroundings and a desperation when they realize they're in trouble. So that tells me they have a degree of consciousness. It may be a very low. They're not going to contemplate Thoreau, but I mean, they have a consciousness without any neurons. And there are other unicellular organisms that have been able to show a degree of memory and of reason and things like this, like putting slime molds through mazes and that sort of thing. So I don't think that it necessarily must be neurons in order to have consciousness. And I don't know what the chemical mechanics of that are, but for our guest's argument, that would imply that the paramecium, upon its death, has an immaterial spiritual aspect of it that goes somewhere.
Okay. Aaron, like a particular theological outlook might say, yes, that's fine, that's true, or a particular theological outlook might say that, that the Creator has only granted a certain subset of organisms souls. Like, either is fine with overall theism or overall belief in souls. As for Shannon, and like, I thank you for letting me sort of pose this in a sense of questions. I'll try and refrain from doing that. Basically, so if we agree that like the level of acetylcholine in either the brain in general or in a particular neuron would have some impact on that neuron's passing on the action potential to a neighboring neuron, then like
not
the
passing
level
on
of
the action
acetylcholine
potential. No, I think that's important. So it doesn't pass on the action potential, right? The action potential is just the trigger that initiates like the electrical impulse to transmit that like to the neuroreceptor. It doesn't have anything to do with the level of neurotransmitter, right? So once that action potential happens, whatever amount of neurotransmitter is available will be transmitted. So if it's a lot or a little, it'll be transmitted, but it doesn't affect the action potential at all. They don't interact.
Yeah, you're right. So my mistake. I meant sort of the passing between one neuron to the other, the causing the next neuron to fire. That's what I meant.
On the receptor side, anyway. No, it doesn't cause the other one to fire either, because action potential is what causes them to fire. Like, what would happen is on the receiving end, like, do you know what like glia cells are in the brain?
Can't remember.
No, okay.
I learned like glia.
Oh, cool. Yeah, me too. So I'm going to do my best. So on the other side, when the neurotransmitter is received, it's not just that neuron that's receiving the neurotransmitter. It goes in some of it goes into the area, and it also like sends message to like glia cells, which are like they're kind of like action cells that like connect different portions of the brain, and they're like more important than we think they are. And if there's like a bit too much neurotransmitter, like if you drink a bit too much and you have a bit too much dopamine, for example, you may be like releasing more dopamine than you usually would, and it's like flooding more areas, or the receptor on the other side that is usually that's used to just receiving a little bit now is wide open and it can receive it all. So it's not like getting more action potential. It's just those like interconnected cells around it are like feeling the effect of that neurotransmitter being received. And then it's having cognitive impact.
Yeah, I didn't.
I hope I'm not derailing.
Do you know how SSRIs work? This is super interesting parlay into SSRIs.
Yeah.
So SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And they actually work in a super strange way, in a counterintuitive way. What they do is they actually keep because all of the neurotransmitter that floods into that cleft between the sending neuron and the receiving neuron, like it sits in that synapse, like in between, like in that cleft between them. And and once some of it is taken up by the receiving neuroreceptor, whatever's left over is sucked back in. Right. So it's sucked back into the sending one so that it can be like resent the next time the neuron fires. What SSRIs do is they prevent it from being sucked back in. So it actually doesn't give you more serotonin. It just stays in the synaptic cleft between the sending and receiving transmitter, so that once the receiving transmitter has absorbed the first part of the serotonin and is able to take more, there's some available because it hasn't been sucked back into the originating cell yet. So yeah, so I think that, but that doesn't make it fire again. You know what I mean? Like, that's why explaining how SSRIs work help. Like, that's what, like, you get a little bit more serotonin that way, but you're not getting more serotonin because you're sending more serotonin. You're getting more serotonin or there's more serotonin available. It's just that the mechanics that usually like bring it back in, like soak it back into the sponge, that sponge isn't soaking it back in and it's staying there to be available once the receptor opens again. So the levels aren't necessarily the important thing. It's the mechanics of the receptors, like what they are capable of taking on the receiving end, not even just what they're capable of sending on the sending end. So I'm still not sure what you're getting at with the level of receptors, because there's ways to augment it. Like SSRIs are a good example, and they do work for depression without making more, like a lot of antidepressants create like a pseudo neurotransmitter that like mimics an endogenous neurotransmitter. SSRIs operate a little bit differently by affecting the mechanics of the synapse itself. Does that make sense? Like, so where like the level isn't necessarily the important thing, it's the operation of the mechanics.
Yeah, that does make sense, and I did learn that a long time ago as well. That's an interesting example.
Me too. We learned a lot of the same things a long time ago. Weird that we differ.
Yeah. Thanks. But my line of thinking, though, that can be applied to the actions of these chemical channels as well, because whether we're talking about chemical channels or whether we're talking about enzymes kind of working to help produce acetylcholine or serotonin, in our stomach, like all of these are examples. All of these are examples of basically chemical reactions where whether or not the desired chemical reaction takes place will depend on when the two sort of molecules come into contact with each other, whether or not the surrounding electron density, which you can visualize as orbitals, overlap in a way that allows for the lowest unoccupied molecular orbital of one molecule.
Lots of physical mechanics need to take place. I agree with that. Like, there's all kinds of physical mechanics required, but I'm still not getting.
Yes.
Yeah,
what you're angling at. So, like, it sounds like you're agreeing with me. Like, yeah, there's a lot of complex physiological mechanics in the material space required.
I don't think either of you are addressing the source of his belief.
Yeah, me either. I'm trying to get there, but I don't understand what it is yet.
For example, do you believe paramecium goes somewhere when they die?
So I'm not that would depend on my particular theology, like my particular religion.
Why?
But a theist in general, I'd really prefer to keep going with like,
neither here nor there. Do you believe that paramecium goes somewhere when they die? Do you believe? So that whether it depends on your particular theology, we are talking about your particular theology. Do you believe?
I don't know what my religion says on that particular issue. I don't know what it says.
Does it matter? What about what you think? This is one of the irritating things about religion. I remember asking my mom as a kid, "What do you believe?" And she about certain things, and she would say, Well, I believe what the Mormons believe. Like, what do you believe? Don't you have any independent thoughts? And you're going to tell me what you believe what the Mormons believe? Do you even know what the Mormons believe? She didn't. She just blindly believes whatever her superiors tell her to believe. She believes it because they do. No reason at all. Not even a presence of reason in her mind. She believes exactly what she's told because she was told to. That's it. That's all. Are you in the same situation?
It depends on the question, because
Okay.
I want to know where the
there are
antenna
some
is.
issues.
Paramecium go somewhere when they die.
Well, I don't know about that particular question.
Well,
That
we're not
doesn't
talking
mean I
about what
don't
you know.
believe. That doesn't mean I
We're not talking about what you know. We're talking about what you believe.
Okay, I don't have a firm belief on that particular
Do you
question.
have a firm
I'm
belief
agnostic
that
on that.
anything goes somewhere when it dies?
Yeah, I believe that humans go somewhere when they die.
But not dogs?
I don't know about I also don't
Well, you
know
don't know
what
about
my
human
religion's
souls
position
either.
on
So we are only talking about belief. We're not talking about knowledge. If we're talking about the afterlife, we're definitely not talking about knowledge, because nobody knows dick about jack about that. They're just talking about what they believe. Knowledge is demonstrable. You can show what
okay.
you know. In this case, we're not talking about things you can show. We're talking about things you can believe. Do you believe that humans go to some place when they die, but somehow for whatever reason dogs don't?
I'm agnostic on that question.
Okay, have you considered
Specifically
it?
with relation to dogs?
What would be the value?
Yeah, I've considered it.
In where do you imagine the line of demarcation is for what level of animals have a soul that goes to an afterlife, to what level of animals don't?
My strong belief is about humans, and about non-humans I don't have strong belief.
Okay, why do you have a strong belief in something that is not evidently true and is, in fact, has evidence against it?
Well, I started giving my model for how the sort of typical objections to souls are actually reconcilable. But you interrupted me when Shannon was interrogating my model.
Oh, I didn't realize you were winning. Let me just sit back and let you continue with her.
I just want to know where the antenna is.
Thank you,
Robert. All right, where's the antenna?
Thanks. So
where's the antenna?
we got to the fact, we got to me explaining that, like, the outcomes of these chemical reactions come down to the sort of specific locations of electrons within their orbitals. And you agreed with that,
Hey,
right?
I gotta jump in. I gotta jump in for a second. So Shannon has given you, and I've given you two, not to the degree, but we've both given you reasons to understand that your thoughts, that your consciousness, that your actions are entirely physical. You are proposing that they are somehow magical. Where is your evidence of that?
Yeah, so that's a different question, and
No,
I agree.
That's the same question
The
we've been
evidence
asking
that would
from the
be,
beginning.
no, that's different from asking, what is this antenna? How can it work? Because that question implies that any model of the soul necessarily is wrong, or necessarily
That's true.
contradicted by the available physical evidence. Right. Okay.
So there has to be, in science, religion does this thing. Let me just set a ground for you, just knowing where I'm coming from. Science is not.
You're breaking up. Hello?
Yeah, you broke up on me too.
Hello?
I think he's frozen.
Yeah, he's froze up.
I want to hear so the electrons. So now you're getting down to the atomic level, right? So you're just basically saying
it's an absolute fact, even though they can't show there's any truth to it at all. So they're making up shit and calling it fact. We call that lying. So that's the difference in our position. We are saying that something is true because we have this evidence to support that it is true. You're saying that we have that something is true because there's no evidence of it and there's evidence against it, but you're going to say it's true anyway. I'm asking for justification for that.
Okay. So
Is your
maybe,
electron positions the justification?
So there's basically my justification for theism, for me believing in theism, isn't the same as what I'm doing when I explain that there is a plausible model for souls working in a kind of antenna-ish way. So I admit that kind of there isn't positive evidence for a kind of antenna model, but I am claiming that it is consistent with the available physical evidence.
You're saying it's a viable model.
No, it isn't.
Is what you're saying.
No, it is not consistent with that at all.
I'm saying it's viable.
So is it viable?
We haven't got there yet. How do you know?
It's not only not consistent with the physical model, it's contradicted by it. So you are saying something is true, can't show how it is even possible, and what you're saying is contradicted by the facts, all of them. So let's restart that. Give me a reason, something we can show to be true, why you claim this thing.
Well, if all I need to show, if I'm attempting to show that something's viable, like I don't need to show that it necessarily kind of is the best supported model, because something can be viable without being the best.
You have to be able to show the facts that back it up. The reason for that conclusion, and it has to be a reason that we can all verify. Yes, this is true, and then it also supports this position. Shannon has been very eloquent in explaining reasons why your assumption are not consistent with that. I've given you a completely different set of reasons, and I would like to do so more, but I think I'm out of place in doing that right now. Your position is unsupported. You can't show the evidence to back it up. In science, we're done. You can't show a reason to believe what you do. Come back when you've got something.
Well, so the thing is, like, we have to lay out what the objectives of the conversation are. So one objective is to show that, you know, that this antenna model of the soul is viable. And isn't.
Look, how is it viable? Please, I'm dying to know. I am on the edge of my seat, dying to know how it's viable right now. So positions, you had me at position of electrons. So we're at the atomic level now. We're all the way down to the atomic level. What's next? Why is it viable? Where's the mechanism for interaction?
Yeah, I've been dying to tell you as well. Okay. So
for the love of God, do it, please.
At the atomic level, the positions of electrons, many of the leading physicists and, like their interpretations of quantum mechanics that are non-deterministic. Like, we don't know for sure whether quantum mechanics is deterministic. And what that means is, like, we don't know for sure whether when an electron is at a particular position, whether it will do a particular event or not, or whether if it's in one position at one particular moment in time, whether it will necessarily be at another position at the at the exact next moment in time. That kind of
thing. At the
thing.
electron level of an atom. Yes, I'm with you. But just a few more seconds, because I think I see where you're going, but it's not. I still think it's unviable, and I want to explain to you why. But go ahead, and then I'll go.
I'm looking forward to that as well. And so basically, if there is this potential for kind of electrons to be undetermined by kind of the prior physical condition, then maybe it could. Maybe the extra variable or cause is something supernatural, which could be like souls.
That's moving the position of an electron and an atom and event. Okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying since there's things that we observe that are inexplicable about atoms at a quantum level, therefore there might be some space there. Like once you go all the way down to the atomic level. But here's why I'm not sure that's viable.
Yeah.
Because like if I hold up this pen, right? You probably can't see it. You're probably not actually watching me. But if I hold up this pen, it's constructed of a bunch of atoms, right? Like inarguably so, everything is. Like at any one point in time, what you're saying is that any of the atoms in this pen can operate differently than they did previously, any one of them at any given time. But even if we see that at the quantum level, at the electron level, we never see anything like this just physically unravel and reconstruct itself in a completely new constitution, in a completely new way, that every atom just like reconstructs itself. We also don't see them go out of and into existence at the atomic level, right? It's certainly not in enough volume to just create, like to just uniformly come together in the appropriate constitution to create a sodium or potassium ion, for example, which has lots and lots of atoms in it. So if your argument is, if you go all the way down to the atomic level, we can see that there's quantum variations that are inexplicable. Therefore, something about the entire physical mechanic that we agreed upon of the brain could be interacted with that way. I still don't think that you've explained the interaction mechanic. I think that you've just said there's some room at the like if you go all the way back down to the very atomic level, there's still a little bit of space there where I might be able to jam it in. But it's not changing the way that the matter of the brain works, not changing the way the neurotransmitter works. It's like you're not just whole cloth seeing ions pop into existence and whole cloth seeing neurotransmitters pop into existence. And that's what would need to happen. Not one atom has an electron in a different position than we would have anticipated it being prior. You'd need more than that, right?
Okay, so let's go with one of your counterexamples, like a sodium ion. So
yeah.
Like let's imagine the weakest possible action potential, right? Like an action potential that's kind of limping along, and it's been so kind of it's so weak. It has such a kind of low enough gradient that it's just about managing to go on. But if it was any weaker by even a single kind of atom, then it just wouldn't continue propagating. Is that something plausible?
No, because that's not actually that's not the way it works. It's not like there's like a gradient of like degrees of action potential. Like once an action potential,
you have
like
to show that there is at least a possibility for what you're talking about. And all you've done so far is the argument from incredulity. You don't understand brain chemistry, therefore magic and souls. Show me that a soul is possible despite all the evidence against it. And one of the things that I tried to get you to understand is, if dogs don't have a soul, well, then why do we deserve to have one? And if they were to go to some sort of afterlife, what would be the point of a dog going to some sort of afterlife? Because if you try to argue that humans do have some kind of point, I think you're going to have a hard time justifying how we do when they don't. Or I think you would have a hard time justifying why they should and why we should. I was never able to separate humanity from the rest of mammalia, if you like. Other animals think and feel just like we do. We're just the only ones who are so arrogant that we can pretend that we will continue after we're dead.
Yeah, like, I understand that, like, a sort of speculative conversation about whether a particular model of souls is viable, which gets into like the nitty gritty of neuroscience, maybe isn't very good viewing for you. And I can understand if you don't want to kind of continue that conversation. So,
I understand what you're trying to say, though. You're saying
you guys
to it. If you could show that there was substance to it, that there's just a there, that there's something to actually look at, then there would be something to talk about. But you haven't, and you can't ever. It's never going to happen. We've been having this conversation for thousands of years. Believers can't ever cough up anything, ever. I want to believe this is all they've got.
Well,
And
yeah,
like
but
about your
I think there's
action
an
potential.
interesting question about whether.
But it's like a threat.
Yeah, sorry.
I think I understand what you're trying to say. You're trying to say like maybe like if there's a wobbly electron at the some sort of wobbly electron at the ionic level, then that means that maybe an action potential that previously would have been like a big action potential ends up being a little action potential, and that has impacts. And maybe that's how the soul gets in. Like maybe that's the antenna, is just like mildly tweaking action potentials, but action potentials are like a threshold that's reached, right? So either that threshold is reached or it is not. It's like an on-off switch. It's not like, oh, there's a bunch of sodium and potassium ions. This is going to be a big one. This one's going to be a big one. Oh, that one only had a couple. That one's just going to be a little baby action potential. Action potential is just a way of saying that the electronic impulse has been released because
Okay.
the cell membrane shift took place.
Okay.
And I don't know what I don't even know if I can
Sorry.
conceptualize what that looks like. But we do have to let you go soon. I'll host again eventually. I promise. But once every 2 to 3 months, I kick around here. So go read some stuff. I'll read some stuff. Come back. We'll talk again because
I'll send you an email.
Oh God! If you think I'm going to read my emails,
I'll send you an email.
Bless your heart. You can do that. It'll be in the inbox with the rest of them.
I think the common good.
I don't check my emails.
I think that these conversations should be had publicly for the common good, for other people to listen to. I would. People are always wanting to have chats with me in email and just to waste as much of my time as they possibly can. I don't think it's a waste of time if it's on the fly off the top of our head, like it is right now, off the cuff. Neither of us is prepared for what the other one is going to bring. I think that's going to be better.
Also, I don't check my email. So there's that. You can send it. I'm not going to try and stop you.
I texted you. I texted you 20 minutes ago. How come you haven't answered? I'm like, because I'm an old man and you texted me. I don't check texts.
Exactly. Aaron knows how to turn on his phone.
I might accidentally see my text messages 2 or 3 days from now. So if you've sent me important information and I need to know it in the next 2 hours, call me. Don't wait for me to eventually decide, well, maybe I should check text messages.
I'm the exact opposite. There's no reason on earth I'm willing to allow anyone to call me. I don't want to talk on the phone to you. Don't call me. All right, Robert, thank you. Have a good rest of your day. I enjoy your good soul chat. Call back again sometime. See you later. Bye. All right. We've hit the end of the road.
I'm sorry that we were going totally different directions on that.
You and I were having two separate conversations with the same dude.
Yeah, you're going into the chemistry, and I'm going into the logic, and this is where I think he was. This is where I think the real problem is, and you could explain everything about it. If you had a PhD, you could continue to explain everything that your PhD would require you to know, and he still wouldn't get it.
Even if his model was right, I don't think it's viable. Your point stands though, because he would be he would have whatever dissonance is required to apply it inconsistently, to apply it in one area and just refuse to apply it in another area, which that's inconsistent in a logical as well. Even if he was right, I don't think he is.
I kept hearing him say, we don't absolutely know. And this is the thing I always hear. If you can't conclusively prove that I'm wrong, then I'm right. That's the position of the believer. I don't know, therefore I know.
That's my motto. I'm right.
I'm afraid we had 2 calls.
Don't call me.
We got 2 calls we never got to, and I'm sorry about that.
Hey, if you liked that clip, you'd love the whole thing. Hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, patreon.com/calltheline. That one sucked. Use it.